Hello everyone and welcome back to a Pints with Jack Skype session. Do you ever feel like you're being watched? We're continuing in Tolkien Month by speaking to Joseph Pearce, who has written many books about Tolkien and his works. Joseph is the Director of Book Publishing at the Augustine Institute. He's the editor of the St. Austin Review and series editor of the Ignatius Critical Editions. You can listen to his podcast, Faith and Culture, and you can also check him out at jpearce.co. And Joseph has written many books, and over the past few weeks, we have spoken about quite a few of them. Further Up and Further In, Understanding Narnia, Tolkien, Man and Myth, A Literary Life, and last week we looked at Bilbo's journey, discovering the hidden meaning of The Hobbit. And today we're going to be talking about Frodo's journey, discovering the hidden meaning of The Lord of the Rings. Joseph, welcome back.
It's good to be back.
So last time we spoke about Bilbo. Today we're speaking about Frodo. What's this book about?
Well, again, as we discussed last week, because Tolkien doesn't write formal or crude allegory, for which we can be thankful, the deeper meanings of the work are not necessarily apparent upon a first or recreational reading. And Tolkien did state specifically, and I'm quoting him here word for word, The Lord of the Rings is, of course, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, end quote. So if that's the case, and of course there's no mention of the church, of course, no mention of Jesus Christ. Well, this takes place thousands of years before the coming of Christ. If it doesn't mention Christ, doesn't mention the church, how can it be fundamentally religious and Catholic? So that's the problem, if you like, that Tolkien sets us. It's not a formal allegory, but somehow or other this Christian dimension is interwoven or subsumed within the very fibre of the narrative itself. And how do we find that? How do you to detect that presence? That was the purpose of the book.
And am I right in saying that he said that when he first started writing it, he didn't have that purposefully in mind, but when he then looked back at what he'd written, he started seeing his faith everywhere, and so built that up a little bit?
Yeah, well, basically that quote I just gave, I cut short. It's actually, if I complete it, the whole thing, then that will verify exactly what you just said. He says, the Lord of the Rings is of course a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, unconsciously so at first, consciously in the revision. So basically, what happens in the creative process, and I think this is something that Tolkien, from his other works, such as his lecture on fairy stories and Mythopoeia, and his short story Leaf by Niggle, which if you haven't read, you certainly should, that we see his philosophy of myth, that basically the creative process is a relationship with the creator himself, because what's the two things that are happening? First of all, we have the talents that are given to us, and of course, that Tolkien, when it came to storytelling, wasn't just given 5 talents; he was given 7. He was transcended scripture, but also having the talents is only part of it, because you then have to cooperate with the gift, with the grace, with the muse, what the ancients called the muses, this gift of creativity. So there is something mystical going on in the creative process. So we either get in the way with our own pride and distort the purity of the gift, or we somehow try to get out of the way. I mean, obviously not possessed by it, it's incarnational, our own personhood is respected. But if our own personhood is actually a personhood which is obedient through humility, then the gift will speak through us very cleanly and clearly and beautifully, full of the goodness and truth from the source. And that's what Tolkien believed, and that's what I think he poured forth unconsciously. But then we see that he wanted, if there were bits that were a little bit odd, then he was going to make sure that they cohered. So we need cohesion, we need coherence, and that cohesion and coherence is basically through the conscious revision, whereby he ensured that the story conforms with his understanding of the cosmos, which is a profoundly orthodox Christian one.
Now, in the previous Skype session, we spoke about the hidden meaning of The Hobbit, and we focused primarily on Bilbo's possessiveness and basically how he's purged of that over the course of the journey. So what would you say is the main strand that runs through The Lord of the Rings? Is there something comparable, or is there... Because there's a lot of stuff that goes on in that book.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we don't have time to talk about most of it, clearly, but I would say that the motif of the dragon sickness, which we see in The Hobbit, is reflected in the motif of the power of the ring in The Lord of the Rings. So, whereas the dragon sickness basically reflects our own pride and desire for comfort and being possessed by our possessions, that the ring basically signifies putting ourselves at the center of the cosmos, being possessed by a power that overtakes us. In other words, if we believe that we can be fully in control of ourselves, if we are completely self-autonomous, we are actually possessed by dark powers. And you can actually see that people that live selfishly, that is exactly what happens to them. So the paradox is that we have to actually take up our cross and accept and embrace suffering and self-sacrifice for other people in order to actually grow fully into the full person we're meant to be. So that's why in the Lord of the Rings, the wearing of the ring is the act of sin. And when we put the ring on, we actually disappear from the good, true, beautiful world that God made. But we don't disappear to the eye of Sauron, who's looking over your shoulder there, because, that we've entered his world. Basically, the ring was forged by him, sin is forged by him, and we enter his cosmos. So we're more visible to him than ever. But if instead of, we can't get rid of the ring, in other words, sinfulness, who we are, our concupiscence is part of who we are, part of the brokenness of the human person. So we can't throw the ring away and just get rid of it, but we have to choose, do we wear it or do we bear it? So the carrying of the ring, as opposed to the wearing of the ring, is like the carrying of the cross. So carrying the consequences of sin, our own sin, the sins of others, bearing the ring is the way we actually gain the victory.
And I would say that probably happens in more characters than just simply Frodo, in terms of how each person bears the burden that they are given, because they each have their own particular one. Sam's being Frodo himself. Faramir and Boromir, those are some guys with some baggage.
Well, Boromir particularly, we do have to insist that Peter Jackson's depiction of Faramir was outrageous, because Faramir basically in the book is essentially a saint. I mean, he says that I would not pick up the ring if I saw it lying at the side of the road, and he also says, I can't think of the other thing he says that I often quote, doesn't matter, but he's someone who's given himself to selflessness, to serving others. He doesn't desire the ring. He says, I would not tell a lie even to an orc. In other words, that I would not tell a lie to the devil himself, right? I don't want to use evil means to a good end. I just want to live virtuously. So Faramir, in fact, is the antidote to Boromir, because Boromir does want to use evil means to a good end, and with good reason. There's this huge evil empire, much more evil than the evil empire that Reagan talked of the Soviet Union being. This evil empire where the leader is not Stalin or Brezhnev, but actually one of Satan's. Sauron is described in the Silmarillion as the greatest of Melkor's, i.e. Satan's servants. He's a demon, and a very powerful demon, leading an army of demonic creatures that are obviously clearly going to overpower Boromir's country, Minas Tirith, right? Gondor. So what hope does he have? Well, this weapon, right?
It is a gift.
This weapon is the hope, and it's a bit like, you can even imagine something like nuclear weapons. All right, in order to defend my own country, I'll obliterate the rest of the world. Well, sorry, that's not really legitimate. And so so Boromir, in many ways, in being tempted to use evil means to a good end, is like many of us.
And all of the people to whom the ring is offered. Galadriel says something very similar, and so does Gandalf, in terms of, I would only use this thing for good, but that's not how it would end.
Right, exactly. You start off with good intentions, but the actual evil itself will pervert those good intentions. And Galadriel says, I will diminish. In other words, that ultimately to be great, we have to be humble. The exaltation of the humble, the first shall be last, the last shall be first. And the ring promises us power. It's the same sort of temptation the devil offers Christ in the desert. That worship me, wear the ring, bear the power of the ring will make you ruler of the world.
And even the same temptation in the other garden, in the Garden of Eden. It's, well, take the fruit, become like gods.
Exactly. This will make you like a god, basically, and the sort of god it will make you is one that's going to be make you very unhappy, and you'll destroy yourself and many other people.
And the antidote to that is Christ in Philippians, to the kenosis, the self-emptying, so that God is the one that will raise you up, rather than trying to puff yourself up with pride and power.
Right, and so being prepared to sacrifice you greatly to destroy the power of power. That's really what the quest to unmake the ring is. It's basically saying we have to empty ourselves of the desire for this thing. Now that might be very difficult and ultimately impossible without grace. And the other important thing in the Lord of the Rings, which is I talk about some length in my book, we know that the sin of Pelagianism is that the heresy of Pelagianism, we can overcome evil through the power, the triumph of our own will. Well, what Tolkien shows us at the very last moment, that Frodo refuses to throw the ring into Mount Doom. He says, it's mine. And this is showing that ultimately no human will, unassisted by grace, can overcome the power of evil. And it's actually Gollum who becomes the instrument of grace. And the reason that Gollum is the instrument of grace is because Bilbo, Frodo, and Sam all spared Gollum when they could have killed him. They loved their enemy. And in passing that test, Gollum was still around at the crucial moment to be the unconscious agent of God's gift of grace, which allowed the power of evil to be overthrown.
Beautiful. Okay, well, let's wrap things up then. Who published this book? Where should people go to buy it?
Frodo's Journey, Discovering Hidden Meaning of the Lord of the Rings, was published by Tan Books. So if people go to tanbooks.com, they will be able to find it and hopefully purchase it. And if people want to check out what I'm doing, they can go to my personal website, which is jpearce.co.
And will they be able to vote on you keeping the beard? Because I've got to say, I'm a bit of a fan.
Well, we obviously don't believe that we can vote for the Pope, and I don't believe that any vote that any of your listeners is going to trump my wife's vote on the issue. As long as my wife wants me to keep the beard, I'll probably keep it.
That's a smart man. And actually, speaking of rings of power, I will be having one on my finger in actually sometime this month. So, do you have any advice for a man who's about to be married?
Yes, basically that you're embracing a life of self-sacrificial love, and that if you do that, you will grow in stature through it, and it is the greatest. It's the greatest gift that I can imagine anybody being given. My wife and I have watched each other get old.
No.
Get older. Get older.
You watch her become more beautiful every day.
Exactly. You can't say you're watching your wife get old. We're watching each other get older, and but natural in many respects, although our bodies, are perhaps not what they used to be, the actual your spirit, your mind, your heart is growing. And you do actually start to see there is a one fleshness about it in the end, because you do things as one. And congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That's the good sort of ring we're talking about.
Indeed it is. Well, thank you for joining us for this series, talking through your books. I'm sure we'll have you back on again in no time.
Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers. See you, everyone.